everyone, this is Maki. Today we are going to take a look at the history of the GUNDAM SEED series. Why did the war break out? Why is there such a deep hatred between the Nautilus and the coordinators? Last time, we discussed humanity's expansion into space, George Grant's activities, and how Patrick Star and Siegel Klein came to meet. This time, let's analyze the history leading up to the birth of ZAFT. Let's begin our second analysis. By cosmic era 45, the coordinator population was estimated to have exceeded 1 million. At the same time, space exploration progressed at an astonishing rate. Space exploration, which required advanced knowledge and skills, became so challenging that it was said only coordinators can do it. In Seed Stargazer, there's a scene where it's mentioned that Nautilus have to work 3 times as hard as coordinators to obtain qualifications related to space development. In their quest to shape humanity's future, the coordinators continue to challenge the vastness of space. George Grant's vision of being the bridge between the present and the future of mankind was becoming a reality. However, human greed and jealousy of others slowly began to erode the world George had envisioned. In the previous analysis, we talked about the nations that were making significant investments in space exploration. The Atlantic Federation, the Republic of East Asia, and the Eurasian Federation were the major investors. Known as the front sponsor nations, they were like major shareholders in corporations in the real world. If the investors stopped funding and supplying materials, the coordinator's space development would grind to a halt. The front sponsor nations presented a demand to strictly prohibit the production of food, especially grain. At that time, the coordinator's technological capabilities were so advanced that the phrase, "there is nothing that cannot be produced in front," was often used. There was no justification, such as safety concerns, for the demand to ban food and grain production. It was a demand to force the coordinators into dependence, to bind them to a subordinate position by making them dependent on the sponsor nations for food. Other unreasonable demands were made. One such demand was the complete disarmament of plants. The coordinators' activities were peaceful, aimed at acquiring new technologies and space resources. On the surface, the demand for a weapons ban didn't seem entirely unreasonable. However, in this era of increased space exploration, there were growing factions that opposed the coordinators. There had been terrible incidents in the past, such as terrorist attacks that destroyed hospitals, where coordinators were being created. Despite these precedents, the coordinators were forbidden to arm themselves as a countermeasure. Have the sponsoring nations taken action to protect the coordinators? To date, there is no record or documentation that the military forces of the sponsor nations have ever acted to protect the coordinators. Although possession of weapons was prohibited, the sponsoring nations did not actively provide military forces to defend the plants. Earlier, we discussed how the Atlantic Federation built a military base on the moon, and other nations began deploying military forces into space as well. While the Nautilus forced the coordinators into complete disarmament, they themselves continued to expand their military presence in space. Amidst the growing discontent among the coordinators, a significant event occurred in cosmic era 50. Siegel Klein and Patrick Star co-founded a political organization known as the Zodiac Alliance. The purpose of this organization was to secure plant trade autonomy, remove restrictions on food production, and gain the right to self-defense. Siegel and Patrick began political action to secure plant rights through negotiation. Plant sponsor nations, who viewed the Zodiac Alliance's goals as problematic, applied considerable pressure in response. As a result, the coordinators became increasingly resentful of the actions of the sponsor nations. In order to continue their activities without attracting too much attention, Siegel and Patrick transformed the Zodiac Alliance into a more discreet underground organization. In Cosmic Era 53, a great event occurred. There was a boy whose thoughts of "why wasn't I born a coordinator" turned into hatred of coordinators. This boy eventually shot and killed George Glenn. While many speculated that Blue Cosmos was behind the incident, the truth remains unclear. With the loss of its great leader, George Glenn Plant established the Plant Supreme Council, a political decision-making body that would play a central role in plant governance. Then, in Cosmic Era 54, another tragedy struck. A new disease known as type S2 influenza began to spread rapidly on Earth. This disease was a mutated form of type S influenza that had originally appeared during the Third World War, before the Cosmic Era. Type S2 influenza, which rendered previous vaccines ineffective, caused a massive number of deaths. Meanwhile, the coordinators, with their genetically enhanced resistance to the disease, were only minimally affected. As this terrible disease ravaged Earth, rumors spread among the humans the coordinators have begun a plan to exterminate the naturals, and this is retaliation for the assassination of George Glenn. As hatred of the coordinators grew, the Turing Protocol was adopted on Earth. This agreement banned the use of genetic modification technology on the planet. In the past, George Glenn had brought back Evidence Zero, one offering humanity a vision of future possibilities and prompting people to welcome the coordinators as new companions on the journey to that future. However, with the assassination of George Glenn and the fear and hatred created by the S2 flu outbreak, people once again began to harbor feelings of rejection of the coordinators deep in their hearts. Despite the adoption of the Turing Protocol, a treaty symbolizing the rejection of the coordinators, France successfully developed a vaccine against S2 influenza. Of course, there may have been coercive power exerted by the Plant Council nations, but the coordinators continue to develop technology to save the people of Earth. Thanks to the new vaccine, the people of Earth were able to overcome the type S2 influenza. However, feelings of rejection toward the coordinators did not disappear, and many coordinators eventually migrated to space. With the events of the Turing Protocol and the migration of the coordinators into space, humanity was divided into two groups: naturals living on Earth and coordinators living in space. In Cosmic Era 57, the space forces of the Atlantic Federation, the Eurasian Federation, and the Republic of East Asia began to station military forces on Plant. The exact reason why the sponsor nation's military presence in Plant began at this time remains unclear, and there is no record of their purpose. Given the subsequent escalation of tensions, it seems reasonable to assume that their purpose was not friendly. The space forces that entered Plant at this time would later evolve into the Earth Alliance that appears in the television series. In Cosmic Era 58, Sigel Klein and Patrick Zhao were elected to the Plant Supreme Council. In addition to their roles as council members, they continued the activities of the Zodiac Alliance. Their efforts to secure the rights of coordinators gradually gained more supporters over time. In Cosmic Era 60, Plant's technological advances continued, resulting in the development of many industrial products and energy technologies. The plant sponsor nations used these technologies, materials, and energy to enhance their own national power. If this was simply a relationship between a corporation and its investors, this might seem like a normal occurrence. However, the sponsor nations began to impose extremely high production quotas on plant. As they treated plant like slaves, the coordinators' feelings began to deteriorate. At the same time, the non-sponsoring nations, which did not benefit from plant's resources, became increasingly critical of the sponsoring nations. Thus, two famous conditions often cited as precursors to war, discriminatory feelings and disparity of wealth, were now in place. Let's recall the cause of World War III at the end of the Gregorian calendar, before the transition to the Cosmic Era. The depletion of oil resources, the destruction of the environment, and the resulting economic recession led to that war. A similar situation was slowly unfolding again. In Cosmic Era 61, Patrick Zhao, a member of the Plant Supreme Council, became the target of a terrorist attack by an anti-coordinator group. Although Patrick survived, the incident left him with a profound sense of danger. In response, he sent his son astronaut Zhao to study in the lunar city of Copernicus. He concealed his family's identity and ensured their safety by moving them to a safe location. Patrick is portrayed as a ruthless dictator in the TV anime. However, at this time he was still a man with a heart who acted to protect his family. A major incident occurred in Cosmic Era 63. Plant's energy production sector was destroyed in a terrorist attack by the Blue Cosmos. The Plant Supreme Council requested a temporary suspension of energy exports to the sponsor nations. This request was denied. Plant was left in a dire situation, struggling even to secure the energy necessary for its own survival. In response to the sponsor nation's aggressive stance, Plant engineers staged a massive work stoppage in protest. The sponsor nations responded by deploying a fleet equipped with the latest mobile armor in a show of force. The excessive use of force by fleets equipped with the latest weaponry against the plants, who were forced to remain unarmed, frightened many coordinators. As a result of this incident, calls for independence within the plant grew louder. Sigel Klein and Patrick Zhao, in line with the growing demand for independence, began to strengthen their organizational capabilities and seriously pursue the militarization of mobile suit technology. In Cosmic Era 65, the first prototype of a combat mobile suit was finally completed. The Zodiac Alliance intensified its activities, gained many supporters, and subsequently changed its name. Thus was born the Zodiac Alliance of Freedom Treaty, and with it the creation of the ZAFT, the volunteer army dedicated to the defense of plant. This concludes the second part of our analysis. The ZAFT organization that appeared in the anime is now born. The factors that led to war, such as discrimination and poverty, are coming to both this fictional world and our real one. Another crucial factor is division. When people cannot see or understand each other's situation, it becomes tragically difficult to imagine each other's circumstances. The plant sponsor nations imposed heavy quotas on plant and exploited its energy production. One of the reasons for this was the depletion of Earth's oil resources. While this was an unavoidable situation, the overly oppressive demands placed upon plant only fueled the coordinators' resentment. Had the people on Earth and the coordinators in space engaged in closer dialogue and better understood each other's situation, they might have been able to reach a more agreeable compromise. If the sponsoring nations had seen the poverty-stricken lives of the coordinators struggling with energy and resource shortages, their opinions might have changed, if only slightly. But Earth and space were divided. The people of Earth saw only the products of advanced technology and abundant energy, and so they continued to make increasingly unreasonable demands. Of course, the interaction between NOTOs and coordinators didn't disappear entirely. Some people, such as those stationed on front, probably continued to interact with each other. It's unrealistic to think that all contact has ceased. Surely some NOTOs witnessed the impoverished conditions of the coordinators. And yet, for some reason, there is no mention of these people in the historical record. The reasons are unclear. Perhaps it was the most inconvenient truth for some individuals. But of course, this is just my personal speculation. Please bear that in mind. Thank you for watching to the end. In the next episode, we'll continue to analyze the history of the cosmic era